Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Children's ITV, or CITV as it became more commonly known, began as a block of programming across the ITV network in 1983, aiming to showcase some of the most popular children's programs of the day to an eager viewership. In many ways, the block was a trailblazer, particularly for its competition. The BBC wouldn't launch its own programming block for children until 1985, and by the dawn of the 21st century, it seemed that you were either CBBC or CITV. Whilst I grew up largely the former, I did tune into CITV from time to time, and don't dismiss its influence and place within the UK television industry. And just after its 40th anniversary, it was sadly announced that the channel would be closing down in the autumn of 2023. This is to make way for its streaming replacement, ITVX Kids, to be found on the new platform, launched by the other side in late 2022. So as that fateful day draws nearer, I thought it'd be appropriate to take a look at some of the CITV idents from years gone by, specifically ones first introduced during 2009. I wasn't watching by this time, but I know many thousands of kids were, and we'll kick things off by looking at a rather nauseating sequence. Well, that was slightly headache-inducing. As you can see, the CITV logo here is formed quite nicely. The C for Children's is the standout letter, the regular ITV being relegated to the bottom of the logo. But the way in which it's all structured, in that rather blocky manner, doesn't make anything feel particularly shoved to one side. It's easy on the eye, and the cute little antennas on top give a sense of throwing it back to TV's past. I know analog was still a thing in 2009, but with the digital switchover incoming, how many sets were still using aerials placed directly on top of the telly itself? But I tell you what, whilst the logo is nice to look at, this ident certainly isn't. I've called it crane because many of the sound effects remind me of that sort of heavy machinery gently manoeuvring things about. That would be fine, but the rapid cuts and zips across the screen just don't gel well together at all. I'm not sure if the intention was to make it feel fast-paced to give it a sense of excitement, but if that was what they were going for, it doesn't really work. I don't have much more to say, other than that we aren't off to the greatest of starts here. Moving on, let's hope we get something a little less nauseating with aliens. Okay, this one I can get behind. We see two yellow alien creatures amidst a stark white background, one of them seemingly asleep. The other alien, aiming to cause some mischief, begins throwing rocks at his counterpart. A small one irritates the sleeping creature, but before his mate can throw a bigger rock, he pulls on a cord, causing the biggest rock of all to fall and kill his friend? I know it's played for laughs, but that's quite the message to send out, don't you think? I like how the CITV logo is presented here, as a black outline on the yellow splat, which, may I remind you, just a few seconds ago was a living alien. The playfulness is a fun aspect of this one too, and exactly the kind of vibe you'd want to be establishing with a children's TV channel. That sense of mischief and fun, all done safely of course. For the love of God, please do not go dropping any boulder-sized rocks on your friends, it will not end well. My main criticism is the background. I know blank white backgrounds can work for some idents, but especially since the characters are already bright in tone, I think the white really hampers the overall look of the piece. There's no original music too, which, not inherently a problem, wouldn't have gone amiss, especially with the mischievous angle that this ident is going for. Let's see if that sense of fun continues with our next sequence, lasers. Subverting the expectations, are we? We see a kid drop down into a museum-type setting, a classic cliché for any sort of spy or heist movie, one where the crooks are aiming to capture something valuable, doing so while surrounded by a multitude of laser beams. However, this is CITV, and we can't be promoting theft to children, so instead of stealing the logo, the child merely switches off the lasers, so he can straighten one of the antenna. Well, fair enough. I do like how it doesn't go in the direction you may think it would, with perhaps the child just nabbing the logo and setting off the alarms leading to some kind of chase. The resolution is funny when you think about it, and overall promotes a message that breaking and entering is okay, kids, so long as you're doing it to help someone or something out. I am joking, of course, but the sense of fun is there, which, as mentioned, is quintessential for a children's TV channel. The animation style is also quite neat too. I like how we've gone from the aliens, which was fully three-dimensional, to this more 2D style of animation. It very much reminds me of the kinds of kid shows that I used to enjoy growing up, and goes to show that if the concept is strong, it doesn't really matter what kind of animation you're using. We'll view a different kind of storytelling now for our next ident today, Stickmen. God, this takes me back. I say that because even though I wasn't watching CITV around the late 2000s, early 2010s, this kind of stickman fighting was everywhere on the internet around then, and even beforehand. Remember those early flash game sites? Literally where you could play the most random and often most unhinged kind of game? Well, stickman fighting games sort of became like their own genre for a time in this field, and I loved every single one of them. This ident seems to take direct inspiration from that phenomenon, as we see two stickmen fight it out around the CITV logo. The movements of the characters are very reminiscent to what you'd see in these games, and the added cartoon sound effects, many of them you'd hear in the golden oldies like Looney Tunes and Scooby-Doo, to name a few, only just emphasise the sense of fun, but also the ridiculousness. But why this works for CITV, and children's channels generally, is that the idea of two stickmen fighting is exactly the kind of concept that a child could conjure up, and possibly even realise with a bit of pen and paper. I also really enjoy the ending, how the left stickman delivers a kick so powerful, not only does it shatter his competition, but it also takes him out too, their bodies and heads landing neatly on top of the CITV logo, forming the antenna. Now that is a clever way to end your sequence. While some over-the-top music would have been the finishing touch for me, this is definitely my favourite sequence so far out of the ones that we've looked at. We'll see if we get another winner on our hands now, as we look at Somersault. This one is just odd. At first the concept seems clear and one that I can get behind. A group of kids are messing about on the CITV logo, leaping antennas, somersaulting off the top of it, climbing, etc. And that sounds fun, and being that kids love to explore in this manner at playgrounds or obstacle courses, it seems like a shoo-in winner. However, the execution feels too simple. Why not layer the CITV logo amidst a plethora of different obstacles that these kids have to overcome first? Make it a proper jungle of things to leap over or climb, just to really nail down that central concept. Because after the first few seconds, I'm just left scratching my head as to why more wasn't done with this idea. Also, the constant blaring of sirens in the background. Are these kids not meant to be doing this? Is the CITV logo a public monument? Will they be arrested for climbing onto it? Again, I am joking, but the sirens wailing constantly just makes this whole sequence that little bit more irritable, at least in my opinion. I've seen worse for sure, but this is a major case of missed opportunity. If you're going to present the CITV logo as some kind of obstacle where fun can be had, then really push forward with that notion. Make it the goal of a course or something like that. Let's hope another opportunity isn't missed with our next ident today, Robot. I wonder what franchise inspired this one. You've got to keep in mind, this was 2009. The Transformers movies were really starting to take off at the box office, and given the various animated versions of the characters airing on TV, then why not have an ident that was inspired by it? Again, shown in that rather simple 2D style, we see a boy who has become a robot. After moving around and getting used to this form, the boy quickly transforms into the CITV logo, popping his human head up one last time before descending forever. It's a cute concept for sure, and it's fun to see the boy see what different moves he can pull off before transforming into the CITV logo at the end. I like the little detail as well, of the regular ITV logo being on its leg before he transforms. Nice bit of consistency there, and we love to see it. The 2D art style is nice, as mentioned, but the stick figure hands and feet are starting to unsettle me just a little bit. I'm not sure if this art style was based off a particular illustrator, but there's just something about these designs that doesn't work for me after a while. But that, of course, is just personal preference. So, Robot is fine just as it is. It does make me wonder, though, why a lot of these sequences don't have any music. Like, was that an active choice? Musicless idents can work, but for a kids channel, an original track can often make these really come alive. But I think we'll strike lucky with our next sequence, Mousetrap. This one look familiar? If you're a long-time viewer, you may remember that we did cover this sequence in episode 100 of the Ident Review, and that's a 2-hour plus video which I highly recommend that you check out. But I'll briefly summarise my thoughts on this one again here. Who knows, they may even be slightly different. We see a metallic mouse in a metallic home gaze at a lovely piece of cheese, stationed on a metallic mousetrap. After giving it a nudge to no avail, it tries to spring the trap, the mouse cleverly dodging the impact, landing atop the cheese, which itself is revealed as the CITV logo. I enjoy this one for many reasons. For one, we have a piece of original music. It's very simple and upbeat, but given that the whole image for this one is metallic and the mouse is a wind-up one, it kinda reminds me of those carnival attractions where you'd see a set wind-up toy run its course. Ultimately, the music is inoffensive and works surprisingly well. I love the CITV cheese look, as not only does it share the colour, but the way in which it's been crafted looks fantastic, with the ITV indentations at the bottom and all. It's also cute how the mouse sits atop, with its body and ears acting as the antenna, another clever subversion from the normal look, but one that arguably comes off even better. My guess is that this was created via some form of stop-motion animation, which is one of my favourite art forms. The amount of time, concentration and patience required to make even just a short sequence like this always pays off when you see the finished result. I think this might just edge out the Stickmen as my favourite sequence so far, but we're going to be sticking around this metallic world as we move on to the machine. Nice to get something more than 10 seconds long. Set in the same world as Mousetrap, we see a huge machine in action, and every process that it goes through, from seemingly mundane parts falling into it, before being put through some kind of furnace and a whole other manner of procedures. After all is done, we see the result being a multitude of metallic creatures brought to life by the machine, all with very distinct appearances. As the camera pans out, we see the machine working in its entirety, the main revolving cog bearing the CITV logo, which looks engraved, a nice touch. I love idents like this, where they show you a step-by-step process of something taking shape. It's layered with intricacy and detail, and I love how the overall aesthetic is like some kind of CITV factory. I do have some criticisms though. At first I thought the finished result would be the bright yellow CITV logo, but I do enjoy the various little characters that are churned out instead. Secondly, whilst the CITV logo does look cool in the final image, the lack of colour could make it get a little bit lost for those not looking well enough, or those with poor vision. Even had the outline been a bright yellow to distinguish itself from the metallic grey that takes up the rest of the picture, that could have made the world a difference. I get we are in this world of metal and machines, but the Mousetrap sequence had the CITV logo in its vibrant colour, so why not this one too? Despite my drawbacks with it, it definitely remains a solid sequence. And for our final variant today, we'll gather our metallic resources and take a trip to the moon. Alright, this one is glorious. We see a metal rocket racing through space, the design lovingly evoking the classic look of rockets in the works of fiction. It reminds me of some of those really early silent films that aim to depict man travelling to the moon, or in early covers for sci-fi books. Upon landing on the moon, which surprisingly looks pretty decent laid out in a metallic form, the main robot descends and plants a flag, bearing the CITV logo. I'm so glad that the flag was the most vibrant shade of yellow that they could have picked. Had the flag been devoid of any bright colour like the machine variant, then that would have let the whole thing down. But whilst the robot is happy with this one giant leap for machine kind, his rocket takes off, leaving him stranded. But all is not lost, as another robot pops up from one of the craters, saying CI to leave our Robonaut to say TV. It's cute, or charming to say the least, and it makes me wonder why calling out the channel name wasn't done in more sequences from this era. I love pretty much all of this sequence, however. The metallic designs are working to their peak, the rocket looks great, the moon's surface, even though we see a regular moon in the distance. The robot designs are fun too, and is it me, or do they ever so slightly remind anyone of the robots from the Smash adverts? The music here is great too, a tad frantic but upbeat enough to help strengthen the situation that we see our robot friend in. Had this whole era of CITV been presented in this style with characters such as this, I wouldn't have been complaining. but as they very sweetly wave to us from their metallic moon, it is time for us to wave farewell to this episode. Overall, the 2009 batch of idents for CITV had some spectacular highs, but also some puzzling inclusions. That first one, let's just write that off because I don't think I could ever watch that again without feeling sick. Some of the 2D style sequences, like the somersault and robot, are generally fine, but could have done so much more. There's great bouts of fun, like with the stickmen and the aliens, but for me, it's the metallic variants that showcase CITV at its best here. Quirky, inventive sequences that aren't afraid to be a little bit longer in order to give us some idents that are memorable, different, and perhaps most importantly for CITV, fun. Again, if only all of the batch had been presented in this style, that truly would have made the other side stand out from its competitors. After 4 years of representing the channel, these would all be phased out in 2013, with CITV undergoing a rebrand to be more in line with the new ITV look as a whole, a rebrand which we have indeed covered on this show. But for the 2009 batch, I can only see their appeal growing as the years pass by. In many ways, they represent the last stand of really pushing the boat out for kids' TV idents in the analogue age of television, at least here in the UK. And with CITV as a whole shutting down later in 2023, I feel some of these sequences will stand the test of time as some of the channel's finest output in terms of presentation. Farewell CITV, thanks for the memories. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Ident Review. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like the video, subscribe to us here at AMTV, and let me know your thoughts on the idents we've looked at today in the comments down below. Until the next time, see you later. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Hooks Media, Ben Freeman, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Bruce Danton, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Fabina UPCV 2.0, and Traffy, our AMTV staff members.